Since last week was Father's Day, I thought we would just go back and recap our series in the Gospel of John called The Invitation. You know, John writes his purpose statement in John chapter 20. He said that he's written these things so that you may believe, and that by believing you'll have life. And John wrote this book to two different audiences. He wrote it firstly to unbelievers, to show them the signs that Jesus truly is the Son of God. But he also wrote it to believers to assure them you've made the right choice in believing in Jesus. That's why this series is so great for us, because it helps us, it shows us how we can invite unbelievers to see the signs that Jesus is the Son of God, but it also assures us, it also builds our faith that we've made the right choice in serving and following after Jesus. And so in these early chapters in John, what we've seen is John giving us these invitations to come and see that Jesus is the Son of God. And firstly, we saw that he said, come and see your true reason. That Jesus is the Word. He's the true reason for living. And we find our true reason when we find our author. And that author becomes the authority over our lives. But then secondly, we saw how does God actually reach a skeptic? And we saw that God actually reaches a skeptic through revelation, through his creation, through the giving of his law, through the giving of his Son, and the grace and truth that we see through him. But then also we see that God reaches a skeptic through people. And he uses unlikely people like John the Baptist. And so he can use us. And so God actually reaches a skeptic. He shows us that we can come and find real answers in him. Thirdly, we saw that we actually overcome our doubts, not actually by getting answers to all our questions, by actually coming and seeing the person of Jesus, journeying to find out who he actually is. And when you actually find him, there is something about meeting him that makes you just have to tell somebody else about it. But then last time we saw that we can trust in Jesus. We're invited to trust in him, and we saw this at the wedding at Cana, that he's the true master of the feast, that he's the giver of true and better wine, and he is the one who has made your future certain by booking a place at the future wedding in the millennium. And that all came about through his hour, through his great laying down of his life for us. And so this week in John chapter 2, at the end of John chapter 2, we see another invitation where John invites us to come and see his passion.
So why so much burning passion from Jesus here? I mean, Jesus has a whip. This is Jesus' Chuck Norris moment. He has a whip in the temple, but you know, we see that there's quite a lot of substance to Jesus, don't we? Jesus, he had a hammer. He was a tradesman. Jesus has a whip in the temple, but we also see Jesus is whipped eventually, isn't he? Jesus is whipped and he has to carry a heavy cross. And all those things, they kind of combine this morning in the text that Ian just read out for us to show us Jesus' burning passion. This is John's invitation to us this morning. Come and see his passion. I want to give you the backstory to what's happening here. Verse 13, it tells us that this is the time of the Passover. And so what happened at the time of the Passover is that you would have all these people from surrounding towns in Jerusalem. They would come and they would make the trek into Jerusalem. They would come and bring an animal for the sacrifice, and they would also have to pay a temple tax. The temple tax was to basically pay for the upkeep of the temple. But I don't know about any of you, if you've ever tried to travel with an animal before. Have you ever tried to travel with an animal? It's not easy to put an animal in your car and to go on a long distance. And so what they would actually do is they would make this 2-day journey along the dusty roads, and rather than bring an animal with them, they would actually go to a place nearby the temple, purchase an animal nearby to take it for their sacrifice, and also to pay for the temple tax. And here's where you see the burning passion of Jesus come out. You see it in three things. Firstly, you see it in distraction, you see it in corruption, and you see it in exclusion. So basically, what you see here is that the traders, they are in the court of the temple itself. The sheep are going nuts. There's pigeons flying everywhere. Men are yelling. Money is exchanging. The temple has become an emporium. It's become a marketplace. And so you can just imagine Jesus bends down and he ties these 3 cords together as a whip. And he's in his heart is this burning passion. They are making my Father's house a marketplace. They're making it an emporium. They are distracted from my Father's glory. You see, the temple in those times was not just a building. The temple was very much entrenched in their heart and life. It was so significant to them. It wasn't just a building. And so Jesus is sitting there wondering, where is their reverence? Where is their awe for God, the dwelling place of God? D.A. Carson, he put it this way. He said, instead of solemn dignity and the murmur of prayer, there is a bellowing of cattle and the bleating of sheep. Instead of brokenness and contrition, holy adoration and prolonged petition, there is noisy commerce. And so there is this distraction going on in the temple, but there's also corruption going on in the temple. You see, this temple tax that they had to pay, it actually had to be paid in a certain currency. And so all these people from the surrounding towns, they would come with their currency, but they would come to the place nearby Jerusalem and they would exchange their currency for the temple currency. And so they would take that currency and then they would pay their temple tax. Now, what was happening here is that these city folk were ripping off these country folk by giving them dodgy exchange rates. And so they were making a big profit out of this, out of what was going on. And so Jesus' burning passion is being riled up because often poor people coming from these towns are being ripped off. They're being exploited for these religious activities. So there's distraction happening, there's also corruption happening, and there is also exclusion happening. You see, this very court where this is all taking place is a place in the temple called the Gentile court. It was the outer ring of the temple, and basically it was the place where non-Jewish people, Gentiles from all nations, were supposed to be able to come and to offer their sacrifice and their prayers and their worship to God. And so by these people setting up in the temple court, what are they doing? They are blocking access. They are excluding people from coming to worship God. Now, this is completely anti Solomon's original plan for the temple. You know, when Solomon built the temple, his vision for it was that it would be a place for all nations to come. For all nations to come and to gather and to worship the one true God. And so these people have no sense of desire to see other people come. They are blocking access for people. They are careless about the spiritual needs of people from all nations. This is why Jesus has such a burning passion going on in his heart. The burning passion of Jesus was that nothing would distract from the Father's glory, that no one would be exploited, that no one would be excluded from access to God, no matter their race, no matter their social background, no matter their sinful record. But think about it. What right did Jesus have to display this burning passion? What right did someone like Jesus? He had no official place in the temple. He had no kind of official position. And so he's come in here and he's turned the tables up and he's got a whip and he's cracking it. What right do you have? Well, this is exactly the question that the Jews had. Look in verse 18. They say, what sign do you show for doing these things? In other words, what right do you have to regulate these temple practices? And if you do have a right, then show us a sign. Back it up with something. Show us your credentials. They want a cheap sign. Now, they're confused by Jesus' response. You know, sometimes we get confused by God. The other day, I was reading my Bible and Indy came up to me and she said, "Did God really write that book?" And I said, "He sure did, darling." She looked at it and she went, "Man, he writes so small." You know, sometimes we get confused by God, and this is what they do. They actually get confused here because Jesus' response is he says, what does he say? "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." And they're completely confused by this. It took 46 years to build this temple, they scoff, because they don't understand that Jesus is talking about the destroying of his body that will be raised up again. Now, don't miss what they missed. here. This is very powerful. This is what Jesus is saying. You don't know it yet, but this burning passion that I have for God's glory is going to disrupt your religious preoccupations so much that you're going to kill me for it. Just like you're destroying the temple, my Father's house right now, you're going to destroy me. This is what he said. You're going to flog me with a whip. You're going to send me to a Roman cross. And in AD 33, Jesus does rise again. And in AD 70, the temple gets flattened. So who is the true temple? Who is the temple that lasts? Who is the object of our worship? Jesus is saying, I am. I am. And this has remarkable implications. This for us. Because what Jesus' burning passion is, what he is showing us, is that he has the right to command our burning passions. Because he is the Son of God, he has the right to command your burning passions. He says, the glory of God must be your burning desire. It must be your burning passion. He showed this in this very unpopular way, in this very disruptive way, so that the disciples, they're actually looking upon what Jesus is doing. And Psalm 69 verse 9 comes to their head. This Old Testament passage, zeal for your house will consume me. This is what they remember. He showed such a burning desire for this. You know, this is what our passions do. Your passions actually consume you. Whatever you are most passionate about will consume you. It happens for Jesus, right? He is so passionate about these things that he actually goes all the way to the cross for them. He is consumed by them. They eat him up. And so they consume him. Now, passions are a beautiful thing, right? Passions are wonderful. We love passions. You know, I love to be around people who are passionate, who pursue their loves, who buy things for it, who sacrifice for it, who risk for it. They protect it, they defend it. There's a sparkle in their eye because of it. But the truth is, whatever you are most passionate about will consume you. You know, one of the great joys of the last couple of months is to actually see Michelle, my wife, take up something that she is passionate about. For a number of years, she has sacrificed for my passions and the things that I've been pursuing. And just this year, as I finished my study in passions, Michelle got the chance to take up some of hers. And so she's actually been passionate for a long time about health and fitness and Pilates and healthy eating and things like this. And so she signed up for this course where she's training to become a Pilates instructor and all these different things that go with it. And what's so exciting for me to watch is that, you know, how deep it has gone down in her. She has spent all this time studying. She purchased, paid fees to do the course. She spent all this time studying, reading books, hours on her laptop. And then the other day, or about a month ago, she actually, she said, come over here. And I stood there and she kind of drew on my back all the joints, all the muscles, all the bones, all the names for it, how different body parts affect other different body parts. And what I realized in that moment, man, this has gone down deep in her. This has actually become a passion. She's not just trying to recall this or remember it, but she's actually studied this. This has become a passion for her. You know, whatever is your great passion to some degree consumes you to some degree. Your passions get right down into your bones and your joints. It's what you love most. It's what you spend your time thinking on. It's what you spend your money on. It's what you'll defend. In fact, the other day, she actually defended it to me. I said to her, so how's it going with learning about the gym instructor? And she corrected me and said, it's a Pilates instructor. She even defended it. So, these are the things we get passionate about. They consume us. Now, our passions are not bad, are they? Passions are amazing. Go for your passions. Everyone here today, find your passion and pursue it. When I found my passion, I didn't know this. It took me 10 years to find my passion about connecting people's heart to the heart of God, about teaching the word. It took me 10 years to find that. But when I found my passion, I pursued my passion. I studied, I chased it, I spent money on it, I defended it to people who I thought were crazy. Go for your passions. But I have to tell you something quite strongly, quite flip up the tables, pour out the money sort of style, is that Jesus commands your greatest passion. Jesus commands your highest passion. Jesus wants you to take your God-given passions and to surrender them to Him so that they point to a higher passion that you have, the glory of God. Passions aren't bad. Take your passions and make them point to a higher passion. You know, Tim Keller, he says this: sin isn't only doing bad things, it is more fundamentally making good things into ultimate things. Sin is building your life and meaning on anything, even a very good thing, more than on God. Whatever we build our life on will drive us and enslave us. Sin is primarily adultery. You know, even connecting a passion for connecting people to the heart of God, to teaching the word, that can become a sin. You know, it can become a passion that's unhealthy, where you seek the approval of other people and your worth rises and falls on how well you think you've taught the Bible. This is making your passions terminate on themselves. Your passions actually just being about you. You see, think about this. People ask this: what are you passionate about? You think about that. What are you passionate about? And they say, well, I'm passionate about sport, or I'm passionate about food, or I'm passionate about music, or justice, or something like this. But if your passions are not invested in something that is greater than you, then really your passion is yourself. You know, here's a picture of what I'm talking about. Fabio is passionate about the stars. He's passionate about the planets, about what is happening in space. Now, I like looking at stars too, but Fabio is passionate about it. He has purchased a telescope. He stays up late at night when a special event is taking place in space. Fabs is there and he posts on Facebook about it. Now, many amateurs are passionate about that. But the thing is, for many of them, the stars and the planets, the enjoyment of that just terminates on themselves. It's about their own enjoyment. But I love it. Whenever Fabio shoots that telescope in the sky and he posts about it, he always points to the one who made the stars. He always has this kind of pointing of the glorious God who made them. That's a picture of what I'm saying. Your passions must point to a greater passion. Shoot for the stars, they say, but chase what you love. Chase what you love, but shoot for higher than that. Shoot for the glory of God in all that you do. Jesus commands your greatest passion to be for the glory of God and for His Father's house. Now, I would have long said that my passion was AFL football. I never, ever had to work for that one. It was in my blood from this high, but you know, it actually became an unhealthy thing in me. I remember even early in our marriage, I would never actually want to leave the house, even if there was a game on that wasn't my team's. I just liked to watch football all the time. But what I realized, and I would even give up, be willing to give up social gatherings and stuff just because I'd want to stay home and watch the game of football. And so really, was my passion the game of football, or really actually was my passion just me? And just enjoying what I want to do at the expense of other people. But now, I am still passionate about football. I went to the game last night. I had a great time at the game last night. I loved it last night. But God, as I have learnt more and more, and by God's grace, as He has shown me how to glorify Him with my passions, He has actually opened up my world to see how I can use my love for greater things. To not be obsessed to watch every game, but also to think more broadly. How can I use this love of football for His glory? And so this year, I started this Year 2-3 football team. We're teaching young boys how to play football, ministering into their lives at football training and at games, and also to their family. Now, there's nothing good about me, but just as I've seen the more of what we should be most passionate about, God has shown me more opportunities to use my passions to make them point to a higher passion. We are all people in need of needing to recover the glory of God in our hearts. I've been reading through Ecclesiastes 5 verse 2. It says something about recovering the glory of God, the sort of glory we need to have. It says, "Be not rash with your mouth, nor let your heart be hasty to utter a word before God. For God is in heaven, and you are on earth, so let your words be few. Have a reverence for God like that. You know, passion is not just excitable words. It's not just great energy. Passion for God is Romans 12, verse 11. Do not be slothful in zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Let me just give you some definitions on that. Zeal, it means urgency and diligence. So you get what Paul is saying to the church here. Be urgent in serving the Lord, but don't just be urgent in serving the Lord, not just careless in serving the Lord, be diligent in serving the Lord. Be faithful, be consistent. Don't sort of never step into serving the Lord because everything, all the stars have to align. Be urgent and be diligent. Secondly, it says, be fervent in spirit. That literally means this: as to your spirit, boiling hot. As to your spirit, boiling hot. Not to your words, not to your passionate looking activity, but as to your spirit, boiling hot. I wonder if you could say that about your attitude towards serving the God and making His glory your first priority in life. As to your spirit, right here this morning, boiling hot. See, Jesus didn't want these traders distracted by their own passions, corrupt in aiding their own greed, careless to the spiritual needs of others. Jesus wanted them boiling hot with urgency and diligence in serving the Lord for His glory. I just want you to think about that this morning, to put that before you this morning as you look upon your own life. Have you been cooling down in serving the Lord? Perhaps you have been distracted by your passions or chasing your own greed. But Jesus this morning is commanding your passions. He has the right to command your passions. He wants your passions. He wants you, as to your spirit, boiling hot, fervent in zeal, serving the Lord with urgency and diligence. I don't suppose you've read the book of Haggai recently. Anyone read the book of Haggai recently? No one's read the book of Haggai recently. Me neither. But Haggai was a prophet after the exile, where God was bringing the people back out of exile. So they'd been away from their land for 70 years and they were brought back in to their land. They come back, they've gone through this season of discipline, and they come back, and now they want to be faithful to God again. They want to display faith. They want to honor Him. They want to love Him. And so they have this idea, we want to build the temple. Because remember, the temple was significant. It wasn't just a building. It was about the Lord's renown. It was very much in their imagination in their life. And so they say, let's build the temple. All this initial wonderful passion that they have to do that. But then they stopped. They stopped building it. And so Haggai is raised up to go and deliver this message about this. This message is startling for us. Haggai 1 verse 3. You never realized you could see something so challenging in the book of Haggai, but here it is. Haggai 1 verse 3. Then the word of the Lord came by the hand of Haggai the prophet. Is it a time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses while the house of God lies in ruin? They quit working on the temple and they start building luxury homes, using the finest wood to panel their homes. God says this, let me get this straight. What's more important to you is not the glory of God, not the renown of your God, not the reputation of your God among the nations, because for you to claim to have a God and have no temple, to let it lie in ruins, you are dragging the reputation of God through the mud before all the nations. God says, you're okay with my temple in ruins, my name, my renown, while you're building your own lives of personal comfort and gain. Now, this becomes the conflict of our lives, doesn't it? Will I live for the glory of God, or will I live for my own comforts? What am I most zealous for? What consumes you? Whatever you are most passionate about will consume you. You know, Kerry reminded me the other night, Kerry Marshall. She reminded me that when the first time I stood up in church to talk about planting Bowden 2 years ago, I said, because I fully believed it, we aren't going to do this with anything but God. And Kerry said that right then she felt passionate about it. About what? About doing everything we are doing for a greater passion, for God's glory. And I still believe that. I still want that. I fully believe, and I want to lead the church in a way that it's not a shop where we come and we buy things from, but it's a share house. It's where every person comes and they contribute of what they have. It's not a calendar thing. Can I fit it in? It's a calling. It's a calling on your life. It's not attendance. It's family. It's not a burden. It's both a burden and a privilege. It's easy and hard. It has joy and tears. It has success and failures. It's a meeting place, but it's also much, much more than that. It's a community of people where Jesus has chosen to dwell. He has chosen to become the head of this church, the true temple, and He commands our burning passion to be about His Father's glory, about everything we do being about the Father's glory. And He wants us to continue working with Him as the head, to build His church, to never quit on that. Even when it gets hard, to never quit in building His house and building His church. Now, when your passions are submitted to a greater passion, you live out what burned in the heart of Jesus. A passion for people. A passion for every tribe and nation and tongue, social background and sinful record. You know, CityReach Bowden must be a place passionate about the glory of God. As to our spirit, boiling. As to our service, urgent and diligent. You know, Jesus had a passion for lost souls. You don't see this anywhere better than in Matthew 9, verse 36 to 38. Compassion for lost souls. He's been traveling through cities. He's been healing. He's had his head down, just doing this incredible work through the cities. And it's almost like he looks up for a moment. He looks up. He looks upon the crowd. And what does he have for them? Compassion for them. He has compassion for them. When he saw the crowd, he had compassion for them because they were a sheep without a shepherd. You know, Jesus shed tears over the lost. You see that in Luke chapter 19. Jesus looked upon crowds and he was heartbroken over their plight. Jesus used a whip in the temple, but he used it because he had a burning passion for people. You know, on the basketball court over here, on Tuesday night with 30, 40 guys milling around, doing their passion, playing basketball, may our hearts be filled with compassion for them. You know, Plant 4 is opening up. People are about to come into this community, the IGA, your workplace, your university, people with all different passions coming in to a new and vibrant community. May our hearts be filled with compassion for them, for their souls. How do you grow in compassion for lost people? You have to see what Jesus saw when he looked upon the crowds. He saw people who were departed from God. He saw people in the depravity of their sin. He saw people with a destiny in hell. He saw people's despair because they didn't have a shepherd. But he also saw his disciples who were the ones sent to go and reach them. That's what he said in the very next sentence. He said, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into this harvest." You know, there is a harvest in Bowden. Just this week, I was having a training session at the gym, and this personal trainer that I've been doing some work with, she said, "So what do you do? What sort of church are you?" I said, "We're a Christian church." She said, "Oh, okay, so you've been going to this church." I said, "I'm the pastor of this church." She said, "Oh, wow, you're the pastor of this church." And I said, "Do you have a faith? Do you believe in God? Do you know, anything like that?" And she said, "Well, no, I'm not a believer." But she said, "I used to have this Christian boyfriend, and I was actually in the circus. I traveled around the world in the circus." She did this high bar thing, and she did this for many years, and blah, 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 amazing at it. And she had this boyfriend from Hawaii, and every time they would, have a break, they would go back to Hawaii and they would go to his church. And she said it was amazing. She said we'd stand in this building and everyone would sing. They would sing about God, and it was just these voices going up. I'd never been in anything like it. Her eyes had lit up by this point. And she's explaining this to me, and she said, then this guy would get up and he would just say these most incredible things. And I just remember sitting in this seat just being like, man, this is amazing. And she said, even then, like me and my boyfriend, we broke up. But she said, even when I was on tour, I would get out my laptop and I would, Google the church and I would watch his sermons online. And it would just fill me with just this peace, and it was just so amazing. You know, there is a harvest in Bowden. She doesn't believe, but she has had an experience like that, and many other people have. They have had an experience like that, something in their past where they've seen the beauty of Christ through his church or some way, and we just need to be faithful laborers who go out into that harvest to bring them in and to call them to serve Jesus. You know, all you have to do for this is show the real you. You know, you don't actually have to be this incredible evangelist. All you have to do is show the real you. You know, so many times we are people out in our workplaces, in our life, hiding the real us. And so nobody even knows who we are. They just know that we're just a person who work, and on the weekends they don't know. They don't know what we do. All you have to do is show the real you and let God work. God will work in somebody who is willing not to deny his name, not to deny who you really are. That is passion. That is true passion, not slothful in zeal, but as to your spirit, boiling hot, as to your service, urgency and diligence. Take your passion, sport, music, justice, football, hairdressing, building, selling, whatever it is, and use it for a greater passion. This is what it means to have a burning passion. I pray that the Lord would give us a burning passion for the lost, to help us think about our lives, to use our passions for his glory and reaching the lost. I'm looking around the room right now, I'm seeing people with all different passions. And I am actually pleading with you. Take your passions. Take what you're passionate about and use it for a greater passion, for the glory of God, to reach people for him. You know, it's what every church should do. Often what we do is we take our passions and we just make the church more comfortable for us. But there's 2.8 billion people in the world who have never heard about Jesus, and their destiny is hell. And we are people who have been called. Jesus has sent us out to bring glory to his Father and to reach the lost. You know, you might actually have to challenge yourself this morning. You might have to have your heart disrupted this morning like Jesus, because he actually did turn up the tables, and he did actually pour out the money. This is what Jesus is doing. He is disrupting what is natural in our heart, the default position in our heart to make life about us. And he is saying, I want you to live for more than that. I want you to live for more than your earthly passions, to bring glory to my Father and to reach people. You know, this might seem like such a large step. You know, how can I do that? That's such a long step for me. But you know, all it actually takes is to be faithful with the first step. Faithful with the first step. You know, often we are just people who are prayerless and can't even read our Bible. Can't even sort of seek to know God just through spending time with him in his word. You know, we have to take the church's mission in our hearts. We have to take it upon us seriously and to be able to serve him. You know, what will this take? What will it really take to have a burning passion for God's glory and the lost? I realize this morning, because for me this week, this was such a disruptive message. Because my heart is so much for my own glory, and to make my passions just be about me. But Jesus has actually come in here and he has turned the tables up on us. And he has dispersed the pigeons. But this is the thing, that growing a burning passion for God will be disruptive for you. You know, so often we want Jesus to agree with us all the time. But here I think we see is a part in the Bible where Jesus does not agree with us and the natural tendency of our hearts to make it about us. And so what needs to happen? Well, it's what the Jews missed. Because growing in burning passion for God takes a death. They did not understand that Jesus was talking about his death. And you see, Jesus' burning passion for God's glory was the death of him. It was the death of him. It consumed him. Whatever is your greatest passion will consume you. And it does, because he goes to the cross and he lays down his life. And so the same thing is true for us. That if you want to have a reigniting of passion in your life, of passion for God's glory, it's not going to come through inspiring worship music or finding your niche in the church or waiting till the stars align for ministry and evangelism. It's actually going to take the death of you. You know, in Romans 12 verse 1, Paul actually uses this language, this temple language. He says, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. The people from the towns, they brought their animals to lay on the sacrifice. Paul is saying, bring yourself and lay it on the sacrifice. Bring yourself. You have to die to reignite passion for God, true passion. But notice in verse 22 that it's only that kind of death that has a resurrection. Now, having a burning passion for God will mean dying to yourself over and over and over again, but it's only then that you will actually find yourself truly living. You'll see more and more desire, more and more in your heart to love God with. And I remember this story, John Piper told this story of a man who got to 80 and he circled around this church the whole life, but his heart was hard to the gospel. And his heart was hard to serving God. And this one particular morning, he came to church and he sat down in the pew, and something that day in the message, God spoke to him and opened up his heart, softened his heart and changed him. And he came down the aisle, and he just came down at the front, and his heart just opened up, and tears were rolling down his face, because truly in that moment, God had opened up his heart and he had repented and received God's grace. And Piper tells how his dad came down and his sobbing was just uncontrollable, and he asked him, why he was sobbing so much. And the old man said that he just sobbed and sobbed over and over again, I've wasted my life. I've wasted my life. I've wasted my life. And it's really struck his dad in that moment that what had hit this man, that he had lived his whole 80 years with just burning earthly passions spent on himself. And that how somehow God had just given him this grace at the age of 80 to truly show him what his highest passion ought to be. It's entirely possible to waste your life. And I want to say to you this morning, to live the life now that you are going to wish that you'd lived. In the future, you're going to not have wished that you live to spend more of your life on your passions, your earthly passions, the things that you accumulate for yourself. You were going to wish that you lived a life that was about, first and foremost, the glory of God. Jesus disrupts our self-seeking. He disrupts our distractions and our corruptions, but he distracts it with his grace this morning. He does it through giving us a vision of what it truly means to glorify God. I want to ask you this morning, what do you need to do as you think about in your heart, what do you need to die to reignite passion again in your heart?